The humidity in Savannah doesn't just sit on you, it owns you. At 11:51 p.m., my garage apartment felt like a kiln. I was packing the last of my gear when my phone lit up the dark room. A group text. From my mother, Laura. We have discussed it. You need to cancel your flight. Morgan needs the help this weekend. Family comes first. 2 seconds later, a notification popped up. Morgan liked the message. They weren't asking. They were collecting a debt I didn't owe. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My eyes remained dry. I didn't draft a desperate paragraph trying to explain why my career mattered. I didn't beg for them to understand. My thumb hovered over the screen, but not to reply. The silence in the garage was heavy, wet, and suffocating. I looked at the uninsulated window, where condensation was already dripping down the glass like sweat. It was a physical manifestation of everything I was suffocating under. I opened my laptop. The blue light cut through the dark room, clinical and cold. I logged into my bank account. There it was. The pending transaction scheduled for tomorrow morning. Mortgage contribution, $2,400. For 3 years, that number had been the price of my admission into this family. It was the rent I paid for a space that wasn't even legally habitable. It was the hush money I sent so my father wouldn't cry about losing the family legacy. It was the subscription fee for a version of love that came with conditions and fine print I had never agreed to. They thought the text was a command. They thought they had leverage. But leverage only works if the person you are squeezing has something to lose. I looked around the room. My camera gear was packed. My clothes were in the suitcase. I had nothing left here but heat and obligation. I moved the cursor. It felt heavy, like pulling a trigger. I clicked on recurring transfers. I selected the payment to my father's account. The screen asked me to confirm. Are you sure you want to cancel this series? Was I sure I thought about the text? Family comes first. No, Morgan came first. Morgan's image came first. My career, my autonomy, my bank account, those were just fuel for their fire. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. Canceled. A notification banner slid across the top right corner. Next scheduled transfer, none. It didn't feel like an explosion. It felt like a lock clicking shut. The bridge wasn't just burned. I had detonated the pillars. I closed the banking tab and opened the rideshare app on my phone. My flight was at 7. I needed to be gone before the son and the family woke up. I typed in the airport code. Pickup, 500 hours. I confirmed the ride. The driver was 8 minutes away. I sat there in the dark watching the little car icon move on the map. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. There was a strange, icy calm spreading through my chest. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a business decision. They had breached the contract. I was simply liquidating the asset. I closed the laptop. The room went dark again, but the humidity didn't feel as heavy anymore. I sat on the edge of the twin mattress that had been my bed for 3 years and listened to the hum of the mini fridge. It was the only sound in the world. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was waiting for a Toyota Camry, and when it arrived, I would be gone. The ride to the airport was silent, which was a mercy. I watched the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees blur past gray ghosts in the pre-dawn light. I kept checking my phone, not for messages, but for the bank notification. At 7 a.m., the scheduled transfer would fail. That was when the real storm would hit. I leaned my head against the cool glass. Why had I done it? Why had I paid for 3 years? It wasn't because I was generous. It wasn't even because I loved them, not in the simple way people love their families. It was because I had been trained to be the shock absorber. Since I was 12, the dynamic had been set in stone. Morgan was the star, the fragile genius who needed protecting and resources to shine. I was the sturdy one, the practical one, the one who didn't need new clothes because Olivia doesn't care about fashion, the one who didn't need praise because Olivia knows she's smart. They called me independent, but what they meant was convenient. I closed my eyes, remembering the day I agreed to the payments. My dad, James, had sat at the kitchen table weeping. Actual tears. He said the family business had taken a hit. He said they were going to lose the house where Morgan had her content studio, the house that was the backdrop for her entire online persona. He said, if we lose this, Morgan loses her career. She's fragile, Olivia. You know how she gets. We just need a bridge. A bridge. That's what I was. A structure people walk over to get to where they actually want to be. I worked 60-hour weeks designing logos for startups and formatting ebooks for authors who paid late. I lived in their detached garage, which had been converted into an apartment by slapping some drywall over the insulation and installing a window unit that rattled like a dying engine. It had no central air. In Savannah, in July. Meanwhile, Morgan lived in the master suite of the main house because she needed the natural light for filming. I paid $2,400 a month to keep a roof over their heads while I sweated through my sheets 50 feet away. I opened my eyes as the airport terminal came into view. The driver pulled up to the curb. "Delta?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." I got out, the humid air hitting me one last time. I walked into the terminal, the air conditioning, a physical relief. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. 7:02 a.m. A notification from my bank scheduled transfer failed. User canceled. 2 minutes later, a text from my father. "Card declined for the mortgage. Fix it. Bank error." Then another from Morgan. "Why is Dad freaking out? I'm trying to sleep." Then my mother. "Olivia, pick up." I turned off my phone. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. It was the specific lightness of a prisoner who realizes the door was never locked. They had just been told it was. They needed me to fail, or at least to struggle in the dark, so Morgan could shine in the light. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a parasitic ecosystem. And I had just cut off the blood supply. I walked toward security. For the first time in 3 years, my bank account belonged to me. My time belonged to me. The invisible chain that had tethered me to that garage, to their needs, to their fragility, was gone. I was walking away, and I wasn't looking back. I stood at the TSA checkpoint, my shoes in a plastic bin, my laptop separated from its case. The mundane ritual of airport security felt strangely grounding. While my phone vibrated in my pocket like a captured insect, the world around me operated on rules, schedules, and clear expectations. Put your bag here, walk through there. It was simple. My family didn't do simple. They did chaotic emotional terrorism disguised as love. As I walked toward my gate, I thought about the invisible chain. It was something my therapist had mentioned once. "You stay because you think you have to," she'd said. "You've been conditioned to believe that your compliance is the only thing keeping the family from collapsing. You think you're the glue, but really you're just the fuel." I had scoffed at the time. Me, the fuel, I was the spare part, the one they called when the real machinery broke down. But as I sat at the gate watching the planes taxi on the tarmac, I realized she was right. They didn't just want my help. They felt entitled to it. They believed my time, my money, my energy were community property, available for withdrawal whenever Morgan had a crisis. Morgan's crises were legendary. The time she couldn't find the right shade of beige for her nursery and made me repaint it 3 times. The time she had a panic attack because her engagement photos got less than 1,000 likes, and I had to spend 4 hours consoling her while Hunter played video games. The time she needed a mental health weekend and left her toddler with me without asking, disappearing to a spa for 3 days. I had always said yes. I had always stepped in. I had always fixed it. Because if I didn't, who would? My mother would crumble. My father would rage. The whole delicate ecosystem of their dysfunction would implode. And I was terrified of the implosion. I was terrified that if I stopped fixing things, they would stop loving me. Or worse, they would realize they didn't need me at all, and I would be truly alone. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Hunter. I didn't listen to it, but the transcription popped up on the screen. "Olivia, stop playing games. Your dad is losing his mind. Morgan is crying. We need you here now. Don't make me come find you." The threat was vague but familiar. Hunter liked to posture to act like the alpha male protecting his pride. But I knew the truth. He was scared. He was scared because without my money, the lease on the Range Rover wouldn't get paid. Without my free babysitting, he'd have to actually parent his children while Morgan chased her influencer dreams. I looked at the boarding pass on my phone. Gate B12. Boarding in 15 minutes. I could go back. I could call them, apologize, say it was a banking error, transfer the money manually. I could rush home, take the kids, let Morgan go to her yacht party. I could restore the peace. It would be so easy. It was the path of least resistance, the groove worn deep into my brain by years of compliance. But then I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the terminal. I looked tired, not just sleepy but bone-deep weary. My eyes were shadowed, my skin pale. I looked like a ghost haunting her own life. If I went back now, I would never leave. The chain would tighten until it choked me. "Flight 492 to Austin, now boarding Group 1, the agent announced. I stood up. My legs felt heavy like I was wading through water. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around to fix it, to save them. but I forced myself to take a step toward the gate, then another. I was holding the key. I had always held the key. The door wasn't locked. I just had to walk through it. I scanned my boarding pass. The machine beeped, a cheerful, decisive sound. I walked down the jet bridge, the tunnel narrowing ahead of me. With every step, the invisible chain stretched taut and vibrating with tension. And then as I stepped onto the plane, I felt it snap. I found my seat, 14, A by the window. I stowed my bag. I buckled my seatbelt. And as the plane taxied away from the gate, leaving Savannah and its humidity and its entitlement behind, I finally exhaled. I was gone. Let them panic. Let them rage. Let them realize that the fuel tank was empty. I was flying towards something else, something that looked a lot like a life of my own. The air in the Austin Convention Center was crisp, recycled, and aggressively cool. Stepping into it felt like shedding a layer of skin. Back in Savannah, the air was a physical weight, thick with humidity and unspoken obligations. Here, everything was sharp lines, glass walls, and the low hum of professional ambition. I checked into the summit, clipped on my badge, Olivia Graphic Designer, and felt a strange thrill at seeing my name without any qualifiers. Not Morgan's sister, not the dutiful daughter, just me. My phone, however, was trying its best to drag me back into the swamp. It had been buzzing incessantly in my bag for the last hour. I finally pulled it out in a quiet corner of the lobby. The notifications were stacked like a pile-up on the highway. Mother, 14 missed calls, pick up. Now. Father text, the bank says insufficient funds, transfer it manually, immediately. Hunter text, my card just got declined at the rental place. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Fix this, Olivia. Morgan voice note 042. Literally ruining my life. I have a brand partnership depending on this trip. I watch the messages scroll by with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. They weren't worried about me. They weren't asking if I had landed safely. They were panicking because the ATM had stopped dispensing cash. Trouble in paradise. I looked up. Standing there with a latte and a knowing grin was Elena. We'd gone to design school together before she pivoted into forensic accounting. She was sharp, cynical, and exactly the person I needed. Paradise was foreclosed on about 4 hours ago, I said, slipping my phone back into my bag. We found a table away from the main crowd. I didn't intend to tell her everything, but the story spilled out with clinical precision. The garage apartment, the mortgage payments, the threats, the escape. Elena listened, her expression shifting from amusement to professional curiosity. When I mentioned the amount $2,400 a month, she frowned. Wait, she interrupted. Your parents bought that house in the late 90s, right? Yeah, 98. And they've been squeezing you for nearly $3,000 a month for a mortgage contribution. In Savannah, she tapped her nails against the table. Olivia, unless they refinance to build a second wing, that math doesn't math. A 30-year fixed rate from the 90s. Their payments should be peanuts by now. Or gone. I froze. My dad said the business took a hit. He said they refinanced to save the company. Did he show you the paperwork? No, he just cried. Elena pulled her laptop out of her bag. Tears aren't tax deductible, and they aren't proof of debt. Give me the address. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. It felt like a violation crossing the line from daughter to adversary. But then I remembered Hunter's text about his card getting declined. They hadn't hesitated to violate my boundaries, my finances, or my future. 124 Oak Moss Lane, I said. Elena typed furiously. Public records are beautiful things, she muttered. Deed history, liens, tax assessments. It's all right here if you know where to look. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her eyes darting back and forth. Then she stopped typing. She looked up at me, and the amusement was gone from her face. It was replaced by something colder. Pity, no. Anger. Olivia, she said softly, you need to see this. I leaned in. The screen was filled with rows of data, dates, and figures. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood the look on Elena's face. I stopped being their daughter this morning, I said, my voice steady. Now I'm just a creditor. Tell me what I'm looking at. You're not a creditor, Elena corrected. You're a victim of fraud. She turned the laptop toward me. And just like that, the last thread of guilt I had been holding on to snapped. I wasn't looking at a family struggle. I was looking at a crime scene. Elena turned the laptop completely around so I could read the screen. It was a kaleidoscope of numbers, dates, and legal jargon, but she pointed to the one line that mattered. Mortgage status paid in full. Date, November 14th, 2019. I stared at the date. November 2019. That was 5 years ago. I started paying my contribution 3 years ago. The house is free and clear, Elena said, her voice devoid of emotion. It has been for half a decade. Your dad didn't refinance to save the company. He didn't refinance at all. My mind raced trying to find an explanation, a loophole, anything that made this a misunderstanding. But, I send the money every month. Where does it go? Elena clicked open another tab. I can't see your bank statements without a warrant, but I can see public liens and UCC filings. Look here. She pointed to a filing under Hunter's name. A lease agreement for a luxury vehicle. A Range Rover Sport. The monthly payment, $1,800. And right below it, a recurring subscription service for a digital marketing firm specializing in social growth and bot management. Monthly fee, $600. $1,800 plus $600, $2,400. The exact amount of my monthly transfer. The room spun. I wasn't paying a mortgage. I wasn't keeping a roof over my family's head. I was paying for Morgan's car. I was paying for the fake followers that commented Queen on her posts. I was funding the very lifestyle they used to make me feel small. They're stealing from me, I whispered. The words tasted like ash. Technically, Elena said, closing the laptop with a snap, you gave it to them willingly because they lied to you. But morally, yeah, they're thieves. I thought about the garage, the heat, the way my mother would sigh and say, we're all making sacrifices, Olivia, whenever I asked to turn the AC down a degree. I thought about the thrift store clothes I wore while Morgan flaunted designer bags I assumed were gifts from Hunter's investments. Hunter didn't have investments. He had me. The sadness I had felt on the plane, the lingering guilt of abandoning them, evaporated. In its place was something cold, hard, and sharp. It was the feeling of a weapon being forged. What do? I asked. Elena smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. You stop being a daughter, she said, and you start being a plaintiff. The drive felt heavy in my palm, heavier than it should have. It was the weight of the truth. Elena had transferred the deed history, the lien filings, everything. It was public record, so it was admissible. I have to go back, I said. You just got here. I know. But if I stay, they'll spin this. They'll tell everyone I abandoned them, that I'm selfish, that I ruined Morgan's big weekend. They'll make me the villain. I stood up, gripping the flash drive. I need to look them in the eye when I tell them the bank is closed. Elena nodded. Go. Burn it down. Booking the next flight back to Savannah took 30 seconds. Checking out of the hotel felt like a waste of time, so I just grabbed my bag and ran. The flight back was different. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I sat in the window seat and planned. I rehearsed every word, every movement. I wasn't going back to argue. I wasn't going back to ask why. I was going back to deliver a verdict. When the plane touched down in Savannah, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the marshes. The humidity hit me as I walked out of the terminal, but this time it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like the atmosphere of a storm about to break. I called an Uber. 124 Oak Moss Lane, I told the driver. I checked my phone one last time. 14 new voicemails, 27 texts. The last one from my mother. We are so disappointed in you. Come home and fix this. I'm coming home, Mom, I whispered to the screen, and I'm going to fix it. Just not the way you think. The main house was glowing. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows onto the manicured lawn, the very lawn that supposedly cost so much to maintain. From the outside, it looked like a sanctuary, a home, but I knew better now. It was a stage set, and the actors inside were waiting for their cue to start screaming. I didn't knock. I still had my key, the key to the front door, not just the garage. I turned it in the lock and pushed the heavy wood open. The air conditioning hit me instantly crisp, an expensive smelling of vanilla candles and potpourri. They were in the dining room. Of course they were. It was a war council disguised as dinner. Finally, Hunter said. He didn't stand up. He was leaning back in his chair, picking at a plate of takeout sushi premium rolls naturally. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused today? My mother Laura looked up from her wine glass. Her eyes were red-rimmed, a performance of maternal distress. Olivia, sit down. We need to discuss how you're going to fix this. Morgan didn't even look at me. She was scrolling on her phone, her thumb moving with frantic speed. I've lost 3 brand deals since this morning because I couldn't post. You owe me, Olivia. I didn't sit. I walked to the head of the table, standing directly between my father and the rest of the room. I placed the flash drive and the stack of printed documents Elena had prepared on the polished mahogany. The sound of the paper hitting the wood was quiet, but it cut through the room like a gunshot. "I don't owe you anything," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor that usually accompanied my confrontations with them. "But you owe me exactly $96,000. "What are you talking about?" my father asked, his brow furrowing. "Sit down, you're being hysterical." I slid the top document toward him. It was the deed history. November 14th, 2019. Mortgage paid in full. Amount remaining, 0. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My father's face drained of color. He looked at the paper, then at my mother. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "You told me the house was in danger," I said, looking at my mother. "You cried. You said you needed a bridge. But there was no mortgage. There hasn't been a mortgage for 5 years. We had other expenses," my mother stammered, her hands fluttering. "Business expenses. You don't understand the cost of maintaining this lifestyle, Olivia. We did it for the family image. For Morgan." "For Morgan," I repeated. I slid the next page across the table. The UCC filing, Hunter's name, the lease on the Range Rover, the bot subscription. $2,400 a month, I said, looking at Hunter. He had stopped chewing. $1,800 for the car, $600 for the fake followers. That's my rent money. That's the money I earned sweating in a garage with no insulation, while you drove around pretending to be rich. "It's branding," Morgan shrieked, slamming her phone down. "It's an investment. You're just jealous because you're a nobody." "I'm not a nobody," I said coldly. "I'm the investor, and I'm pulling my funding." Hunter stood up, then his face flushing red. "You can't do that. We have a verbal contract. You agreed to pay." "I agreed to pay a mortgage," I cut him off. "Not a fraud scheme. And since there is no mortgage, there is no contract. There is only theft." I looked at my father. He seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He knew what this meant. He knew the legal implications. "I've spoken to a forensic accountant," I said, lying slightly about the formality, but they didn't know that. "And I've spoken to a lawyer. You have 2 choices. 1, I go to the police and report 5 years of fraud and theft by deception." My mother gasped. "You wouldn't. We're your family." 2, I continued, ignoring her. "You figure out how to pay your own bills. You return the car, you downsize, and you never ever contact me again." "Olivia, please," my mother begged, the tears, real this time. "We'll lose everything. The club, membership, the status. People will talk." "Let them talk," I said. "Tell them the truth. Tell them you spent money you didn't have to impress people who don't care." I turned my back on them. "Where are you going?" my father asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "You live here." I stopped at the doorway and looked back at them. They looked small, pathetic, trapped in a prison of their own making. "I don't live here," I said. "I'm not the family bank anymore. I'm the landlord of my own life, and I'm evicting you from it." I walked out the front door, leaving it wide open to the humid night air. Let the bugs get in. Let the heat in. It wasn't my house to protect anymore. I drove away at exactly the speed limit. In the rearview mirror, the house that had consumed 3 years of my life shrank until it was just a speck of warm light in the darkness. I didn't feel sad. I felt the specific quiet satisfaction of closing a ledger that had been in the red for too long. The fallout was swift, ugly, and inevitable. You see, when you cut off a narcissist's supply, you don't just bankrupt them financially. You bankrupt their reality. It's called a narcissistic injury. They didn't spiral just because the money stopped. They spiraled because without me there to absorb their toxicity, to fix their messes, and to fund their delusions, the weight of their own lives finally crushed them. They had to face the void I used to fill. Morgan lost the Range Rover 3 weeks later. A repo truck showed up during one of her live streams. She tried to spin it as a lifestyle pivot toward minimalism, but the internet is unforgiving and the bots stopped commenting the second the subscription payment bounced. Her brand dissolved faster than sugar in hot tea. My parents downsized to a 2-bedroom condo 40 minutes outside the city. I heard through the grapevine that my father had to come out of retirement. The illusion of the wealthy, benevolent patriarch was over. They were just people who had spent money they didn't have to impress people who didn't care. As for me, I moved into a loft downtown. It has concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and central air that I keep at a crisp 68 degrees. I bought a white couch because I don't have to worry about sticky toddler hands or careless wine spills. The first night there, I sat on the floor in the dark and listened. There was no yelling, no demands, no humidity, just the low hum of the city and the silence of a life that finally completely belonged to me. I pulled out my phone one last time. I didn't read the texts pleading for one more chance or the threats of disownment. I went to my contacts. I selected my mother, my father, Morgan, and Hunter. I hit block. It wasn't an act of anger. It was the final closing of the account. I had bought my freedom, and I had the receipt to prove it. If you've ever had to buy your own freedom from the people who should have given it for free, share this story. You are not alone.